Force yourself to organize your life. Carl Jung on emotional growth. Have you ever felt as if you were living inside a storm you could not see? On the surface, you manage work gets done, relationships are maintained, but internally, there is a constant, low-grade hum of chaos. Your belongings are cluttered, your mind feels restless, and your plans, no matter how carefully made, seem to collapse at the slightest pressure. You try to organize, to create lists, to build new habits, yet a single unexpected event can send everything spiraling back into disorder, as if your efforts had never existed at all. Why does this happen? Because the chaos you are fighting is not just on your desk or in your schedule. It is a reflection of a much deeper disorder, one that resides in the unseen depths of your psyche. The exhaustion you feel is not from the unfinished tasks themselves, but from the silent, draining conflict between the life you are trying to build on the surface and the unacknowledged forces directing you from within. Carl Jung believed that for a life to have true, sustainable order, one cannot merely arrange the furniture of their existence. We must compel ourselves to embark on a deeper, more courageous journey, a journey inward, where order ceases to be a chore and becomes the natural rhythm of a whole and integrated self. In today's exploration, we will walk step by step through the process of forcing yourself to organize your life, not through simple tips, but through the profound and transformative lens of Carl Jung. This is not a map for coping with chaos, but a guide to understanding its source and transforming it into a life of directed, meaningful flow. Stay with me, because the final step is not about organization at all, but about a freedom you may not have known was possible. 1. Recognizing chaos. When we live in the unconscious. There have surely been moments, perhaps in the middle of a busy day or late at night, when you have paused, looked around at your life, and asked yourself a quiet, unsettling question. What am I actually doing here? Am I truly living, or am I just being swept along? That fleeting moment of clarity is the fog of the unconscious lifting, revealing a truth most of us spend our lives avoiding. For the majority of our time, we are not truly living. We are reacting. We are running on preset scripts, installed in us long ago. We wake up to the alarm out of duty, go to work out of obligation, converse using familiar formulas, and feel sadness, joy, or anger according to emotional buttons that others and our own past know exactly how to press. Life flows on a relentless, automatic mode, like a machine programmed to perform tasks without ever questioning its purpose. Carl Jung articulated this with piercing clarity. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. This is the foundational truth we must face. We believe we are making free choices, but in reality, the vast unseen territory of the unconscious, with its unhealed wounds, its buried memories, its repressed desires, and its powerful beliefs, is quietly arranging our every reaction. Without recognizing this, life drifts endlessly in a state of chaos that we tragically mistake for destiny. This chaos is not always loud and dramatic. Often it hides in the mundane normality of our daily lives. It is the vague, persistent anxiety you feel when someone doesn't reply to your message immediately. It is the sharp sting of jealousy when a colleague is praised. It is the profound exhaustion that leads you to lose hours scrolling through social media or shopping online, as if trying to fill an invisible void within yourself. Behind each of these seemingly small irrational actions, the unconscious is speaking, but we have not been taught its language. Inner chaos is the state of being controlled by the unconscious without knowing it. It is the engine that makes us repeat the same self-defeating patterns over and over again. We fall in love with the wrong person again. We choose the job that drains us again. We sabotage our own happiness just as it begins to bloom again. And after each cycle we lament, "This is just my luck. It's fate." But it is not fate. It is the unrecognized, unexamined unconscious, faithfully replaying its old script. I once knew a man who was, by all external measures, a great success. He had a prestigious career and a stable income. Yet his personal life was a wasteland of failed relationships. Every time he began to get close to someone, after just a few months, the same predictable cycle would begin. Suspicion, control, intense quarrels, and a painful breakup. He often told his friends, Maybe I'm just not meant to be with anyone. It was only through deep psychological work, inspired by Jungian analysis, that he uncovered a buried memory. As a young child, he had witnessed his parents' bitter divorce, a process filled with accusations and a profound sense of abandonment. That fear, buried deep in his unconscious, made him hyper-vigilant and controlling toward any partner, as he desperately tried to prevent a loss he had already experienced. In his effort to avoid the pain of the past, he was inadvertently recreating it in his present. His case is not rare. We all carry within us these powerful unconscious undercurrents. If they remain unseen, they will continue to write the script of our lives, and our existence, instead of being an ordered journey of our own design, becomes a messy, tangled narrative disguised as destiny. Forcing yourself to organize your life, therefore, does not begin with tidying your desk or creating a color-coded timetable. The first, most crucial act of organization is to turn inward and courageously face the chaos that resides there. Jung emphasized that this is not a mystical process, it is a practical one. We can begin to see the unconscious by analyzing our dreams, by observing our own emotional overreactions, and by noticing the repetitive patterns in our relationships. Each time we pause after an outburst and ask, "Why did I react so strongly to that?" we are taking a small but revolutionary step toward consciousness. Without this initial recognition, all external efforts at creating order are merely surface level. They are like painting over cracks in a crumbling wall. You can create the most detailed plans and set the most ambitious goals, but just one unexpected wave of emotion, anger, jealousy, fear, can collapse the entire structure. That is because the foundation itself, the unconscious, has not been organized. Recognizing the chaos is like turning on the light in that dark room. It is the essential, non-negotiable starting point for truly reorganizing your life from the inside out. 2. Facing the shadow, organizing the unseen self. Once the light of awareness is switched on, you will begin to see the dark corners of your inner room, places where dust has settled and forgotten things have been hidden away. It is precisely in these corners that the real challenge of organization begins. This is the territory of what Carl Jung called the shadow. The shadow is the dark, unseen part of our psyche, where we hide everything we do not want to face about ourselves. It is the repository of our denied aspects, our suppressed emotions, our unacknowledged desires, and even our hidden potential. When these parts are buried and left in the dark, they do not disappear. Instead, they gain power. They operate from the shadows, projecting themselves onto our lives and plunging us into a state of hidden, internal chaos. Therefore, organizing your life is an act of profound courage, the courage to bring light into that darkness. Many people mistakenly believe the shadow consists only of negative traits like anger, selfishness, and envy. But according to Jung, the shadow is comprised of everything we refuse to admit is a part of us. A person who is relentlessly cheerful and optimistic may be hiding a deep well of loneliness and grief in their shadow. A person who is praised for being kind and caring may have suppressed a lifetime of anger at being taken for granted. A highly successful and driven individual may be burying a paralyzing fear of failure. The shadow is everything that feels inconvenient to the polished image of ourselves that we try to present to the world, and the more we deny it, the more powerful it becomes. Have you ever lost control and become enraged over something trivial, or overreacted to a minor comment from a friend or partner without understanding why? That is often the shadow speaking. It is a reminder that inside you there is a forgotten, neglected part that is demanding to be seen and acknowledged. If this inner disorder is not addressed, the shadow will continue to drag us into destructive spirals. Irrational anger, blind jealousy, toxic relationships, or impulsive decisions that we later regret. I remember a woman in her 30s who was outwardly gentle and praised by everyone as a wonderful listener. Yet, in her romantic relationships, she lived in a state of constant anxiety. She would obsessively check her partner's phone and lose sleep over imagined betrayals. Deep inside her was a profound fear of abandonment that she had never dared to face. By denying her own vulnerability, she allowed it to operate from the shadows, causing her to become controlling and possessive, which ultimately pushed her partners away and recreated the very abandonment she feared. It was only when she had the courage to admit, I have a shadow. I am also vulnerable. I am also afraid that she was able to begin loving more freely, without the desperate need to control. Jung famously stated, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." We cannot organize our lives merely by setting glamorous goals and thinking positive thoughts. To have true, lasting order, we must be willing to look into the dark, messy corners within ourselves. Facing the shadow is not easy. It is like opening a storage room that has been locked for years. When the door creaks open, the initial sight of the mess, the dust, and the clutter can make us want to slam it shut immediately. But if that room is never cleaned, it continues to exist, taking up space and energy. The shadow is the same. The more we avoid it, the more tightly it clings to us. Forcing yourself to organize your life means forcing yourself to step into that room, admit the mess, and begin cleaning, one small piece at a time. A practical way to begin working with the shadow is to observe your projections. When you have a strong, irrational dislike for someone, it is often because they are mirroring a quality that you have denied in yourself. A person who is fiercely independent may resent someone who seems needy, because deep down they fear their own need for support. A person who values honesty above all else may loathe a liar, because they too have lied to protect themselves in the past and have never forgiven themselves for it. Observing your projections allows you to reclaim the shadow. Instead of criticizing others, you can begin to ask, is this a part of myself that I have not yet dared to face? Organizing the shadow does not mean eliminating it. That is impossible and undesirable. The darkness is part of our wholeness. Within it lies immense creative energy, raw intuition, and a strength we may have once buried. The person who has suppressed their anger can learn to transform that energy into the strength to set healthy boundaries. The person who has denied their fear can use their sensitivity to understand others more deeply. Facing the shadow is not just about tidying up. It is about discovering forgotten treasures. 3. Detaching from the persona. Organizing your social self. While the shadow lurks in our internal darkness, another force shapes our lives from the outside in, creating a different, more subtle kind of chaos. This is what Jung called the persona. In Jungian psychology, the persona is the social mask we wear when we step out into the world. It is shaped by the expectations of our family, our society, and our culture. It is the collection of traits and behaviors we believe we must display to be accepted, loved, and valued. At work, we might wear the persona of the model employee, always punctual, always smiling, even when we are stressed and overwhelmed inside. In our families, we might play the role of the dutiful child, the patient mother, or the strong husband, even when we feel exhausted, angry, or lost. The persona helps us to integrate and function in society. It gives us a face with which to meet the world. But if we live our entire lives through this mask, if we mistake the role for our true self, we lose connection to who we really are, and our lives fall into a state of quiet, inauthentic chaos. Jung stressed that the persona is not inherently bad. It is like the clothes we wear, necessary for protection and appropriate for different social situations. The problem arises when we forget that we are wearing a costume. Many people identify so completely with their mask that when it is shaken, when they lose the job that defined them, or can no longer maintain the image of the perfect parent, they fall into a deep existential crisis. A common example is the person who is always known as the helper, the one who is always there for everyone else. This role makes them feel loved and needed, but it also forces them to ignore their own feelings and needs. They say yes when they desperately want to say no. They smile when they feel empty inside. Over time, the persona becomes a heavy burden, and life is filled with a silent, simmering resentment. This chaos does not come from the outside. It comes from the internal conflict between a self that is living for others and a true self that has been abandoned. Thus, organizing your life is not just about managing your time and tasks. It is about learning to distinguish between your roles and your true self. When you can say, "This is my persona, but it is not the whole of me," you take a crucial step toward freedom and authentic order. In a therapy session, a woman in her 40s shared that everyone called her the perfect mother. Her home was immaculate, Her children were well cared for, and she was always supportive of her husband. Yet, when the doors were closed, she would often sit alone in her kitchen, exhausted to the point of silence. Deep down, she longed for rest, for an afternoon to herself, for the freedom to be imperfect. But the fear of criticism and of failing to live up to her own image held her captive. She confessed with a choked voice, "I don't know who I really am beyond this role." At that moment, the truth was revealed. The persona of the perfect mother had become a prison, and she was the weary prisoner trapped inside. Jung wrote, "The persona is that which in reality one is not, but which oneself and others think one is." Recognizing this is the first step in reorganizing your life around your authentic self. A crucial question to ask is, am I doing this because I truly want to, or because I am trying to maintain my image? When you answer this honestly, you may realize that many of the things that clutter your life and drain your energy are only there to maintain your persona. We agree to attend parties we dislike. We post perfect pictures online to keep up a positive image. We take on more work than we can handle to avoid seeming incompetent. Over time, these small acts of self-betrayal pile up, making the soul chaotic because the true self is being suffocated. Removing the mask does not mean becoming a rebel or abandoning your responsibilities. It simply means daring to allow yourself to be real, to say, "I'm tired," when you are tired, to say, "I'm sad," when you are sad, to admit failure without shame. When we give ourselves permission to live authentically, we can begin to organize our lives on a solid foundation of truth, not on a fragile one of illusion. A practical way to practice this is to observe when you are playing a role. When you are talking to someone, ask yourself, am I expressing what I truly feel, or am I just saying what I think they want to hear? Just being honest with yourself in these small moments is the beginning of removing the mask and reducing the invisible burdens and internal conflicts that create so much of our life's chaos. 4. Inner discipline, the architecture of a free life. After recognizing the chaos of the unconscious, facing the shadow, and learning to detach from the persona, we arrive at the practical architecture that holds it all together: inner discipline. Carl Jung understood that true freedom is not the liberty to do whatever you want whenever you want. That is not freedom. It is slavery to your own impulses, emotions, and unconscious habits. True freedom is the ability to master yourself so that you are no longer controlled by these forces. People often misunderstand discipline as a form of bondage, a rigid set of rules that stifles life. But in truth, inner discipline is the very foundation of freedom. It is the act of consciously organizing the room of your own mind. It is the ability to pause before reacting, to manage your time not as a tyrant but as a wise steward, and to keep your thoughts, words, and actions aligned with your deepest values. A disciplined mind does not make you rigid. It liberates your energy to live intentionally and wisely. In fact, discipline is the most direct form of mental organization. Each emotion is observed and placed in its proper context, and each action is consciously chosen to serve a greater purpose. A woman I once met in a workshop shared that she always felt exhausted and out of control. When she felt stressed, she would shop impulsively. When she felt sad, she would stay up all night watching movies, only to drag herself to work the next day feeling even more depleted. The more she indulged her immediate emotions, the more chaotic and unmanageable her life became. It was only after she began practicing mindfulness that she realized freedom was not in indulging every desire, but in pausing to choose her response. She started a small habit. Before placing an online order, she would sit, take 3 deep breaths, and ask herself, "Will this truly make my life better?" At first, the pause was difficult, but that small act of discipline changed her life. She shopped less, slept better, and had more energy for her work and family. That was her first step toward true internal order. Imagine your inner world as a powerful river. If left to flow wildly, the river can overflow its banks, creating floods that sweep away everything in their path. This is a life ruled by chaos, but if you build firm embankments, the river's power is channeled. It becomes a life-giving force, irrigating fields and generating energy. Our emotions and instincts are the same. If left unchecked, they can drown us in chaos. But when guided by inner discipline, that same energy transforms into creative power, the power to love, to build, and to live true to yourself. Modern neuroscience affirms this. The prefrontal cortex is the part of the brain responsible for conscious decision-making and regulating impulsive behavior. When we practice discipline, whether through meditation, setting small goals, or resisting immediate gratification, we are literally strengthening this part of our brain. We are building the mental muscle that helps us override the automatic, unconscious urges that so often lead to chaos. This means discipline is not just an abstract philosophical principle, it is a practical, trainable skill. With discipline, we learn to say no to distractions, to devote our time to what truly matters, and to manage our emotions instead of being swept away by them. And within that conscious control, we find true freedom. We are no longer a slave to our anger, our sadness, or our unconscious habits. Without this inner architecture, any attempt at external order is destined to fail. You can create the most detailed plans, but one emotional outburst or one night of indulgence can cause the entire structure to collapse. It is like building a house on sand. Practicing inner discipline does not need to start with monumental acts of willpower. It begins with small, consistent actions that build a clear mindset. Spend 10 minutes each morning in silence, breathing deeply, and setting your intention for the day. Before reacting in anger, pause for 5 seconds to observe the feeling without acting on it. These small, repeated acts of discipline are the bricks that gradually build the solid foundation for a well-organized, free, and intentional life.